Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, and Homelessness, or whatever we're calling it today. To start with, I'd like to go around with introductions. Let's start with the committee.
Assemblyman Peterson.
Amy Naposki.
Bill Evans. Ms. Gray Jackson will be joining us. She's tied up. She said she'll be here about 15 minutes. And if we could hear from who's in the audience, and if you represent a particular organization, let us know what that is. That'd be great.
My name's O.C. Madden with Brown Check.
Okay. And I'm Christopher Constant. I wear a few hats. And today I'll be pretty quiet, but I serve on the Fairview Community Council as the president, part of the Business Association, and I work at Aquila.
And I'm Courtney Kitiona, and I'm very sick, but I'm on antibiotics, and I'm with Aquila.
And that she's going to infect me again. I'm Rosalie Nadeau, as you know, from Aquila.
I'm Kenny Peterson, and a few hats too, part owner of Allen and Peterson Cooking and Appliance Center. I'm on the board with the Anchorage Coalition on Homelessness, and I'm a bishop for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that covers Midtown and downtown, including Fairview.
I'm Mary Beth Bragel with Catholic Social Services and the current chair of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness.
Lisa Souter with Beans Cafe.
And Kenny Scollin, Division Manager for Rural Cap.
Corinne O'Neill, Director of the Supportive Housing Division for Rural Cap.
Paul Foos, Project Manager for the Fairview Business Association.
Heidi Heinrich. I am the General Manager of the Lucky Wishbone, the President of the Fairview Business Association, and on the Executive Board of the Fairview Community Council.
Corey Evans, Anchorage Downtown Partnership, and co-chair for the AEDC's Live, Work, Play, Community Safety.
Hi, I'm just a student from UNA taking notes.
I'm David James, a physician with South Central Foundation. I don't officially represent them, but I'm hoping to get somebody who will.
Kirsten Swan, I'm a writer, and I'm doing this for a little neighborhood blog I have in Mountain View.
Yes, sir.
Jerry Jenkins, Youth Mental Services.
Thank you all for being here. We have a couple presentations scheduled for today. I just wanted to take a moment to try to explain exactly what we think we're doing, so you'll know what we think we're doing, and make this process work a little bit better. As you know, or I think you know, this is an ad hoc subcommittee of the Assembly, meaning we have 4 members of the Assembly that are the permanent members of this committee, and we are going to be having hearings, meetings over the next several months on this issue of the chronic inebriate homelessness issue. The real purpose of these meetings is, in a sense, to educate us. All of you folks are much more involved in this issue. Many of you are experts in this issue. Many of you are just, very familiar with it. One of the problems of a representative democracy is that the people making the decisions on issues are not the ones that are necessarily the most informed or the most expert about them. And as the Assembly is going to have to make decisions on policy issues that affect this, that hopefully this committee will be making recommendations to them. What we're hoping to do is, with your help and others who will be joining us from time to time in these meetings, become more expert, become more knowledgeable about this issue, so that when we do make recommendations to the Assembly, we can do so in a very knowledgeable way and have a better chance of success. So that's the purpose. We've been reaching out. Amanda Moser from the clerk's office is sort of our point person and our contact person. We're reaching out to various organizations in the community that we know are involved in this area. Some of you have been notified through that means, and some of the people we're reaching out to are telling us about other people that should be involved. And we can't have enough people involved in this, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't want anybody to get impatient about their role in this process or their participation. We're going to have scheduled presenters at each of these meetings that are giving us various information about the topic. We're going to try to allow as much time as possible also at the end of the meetings for comments from the committee and from the public. So hopefully at every meeting you'll maybe have a chance to say something, but I don't want anybody under the false impression that, you know, this is a committee of the whole and we're all, you know, on the committee and we're all going to be talking all the time. So we appreciate your participation and being here. I think it's going to be very valuable. If at any point in this process you have any concerns about the direction we're going, or think we could be doing a better job on this, or should be focusing on something else, let me know. We're kind of throwing this together as we go along. There's no written formula for how we're going to do it. Most of you have seen the work plan. It's just a guideline for us. So right now in these first few meetings, the focus for us primarily is going to be on getting as much information as we can on the demographics and of the population we're talking about. Who are these people that we're focusing on? What issues are they facing? What problems are they dealing with? Where are they located? Things like that. Later in the process, we'll be getting to those who are impacted by this situation, other than the people involved, businesses, communities, things like that, different governmental agencies. And then finally, we'll be moving into solutions. That's sort of the general path. You know, it won't be exactly defined like that, but that is our overall goal. With that, are there any other comments from the committee before we get started? We do have one, I'd like to make one amendment to our agenda. There's copies of the agenda out on the desk if you didn't get one. I would like to, I think the fire department ready to make a presentation today as well?
Maybe a very brief, just introductory.
Okay, yeah.
So
We were literally getting things together, you know, up to an hour ago. Then I understood that the fire department would be here and might be able to make a brief presentation, and so we'll put a spot on that on the agenda after the other two presentations. So with that, let me get to our first presentation, and that is from Lisa Sauter, the Executive Director of Beans Cafe. And Lisa, if you just join us up here.
Certainly. What I'd like to request is that Mary Beth and I kind of speak together. We work very closely and we have a campus setting, and that's something we're working very hard on, being on the same page continually. So I think it's most appropriate if we kind of present together. And Mary Beth has really more of the hard numbers and facts because of the way they do their intakes daily. So which side do you want us on, matter?
Whatever side you're comfortable with, just have a seat and let her fly.
Thanks.
Don't be scared, this is just backup. I'm not going through all of this, just in case you had any questions. I do want to say, first of all, thank you very much for letting us speak to you today. It's very commendable that you want to get a full picture of how this is affecting the community. So thank you very much for your efforts in this behalf. I did use the work plan as sort of a loose template for the information that I'm going to give. And I did write it down because it's a lot, but please feel free to interrupt me with questions if something is not clear. So as I mentioned before, for those of you that just came into the room, I am with Catholic Social Services, and I am the current chair of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. With Catholic Social Services, or CSS, as the largest provider of emergency shelter services through the Brother Francis Shelter and Clare House, we offer a vital piece of Anchorage's safety net. Today, I want to specifically address the homeless population that is served at the Brother Francis Shelter, we refer to as BFS, which is our emergency shelter for adult men and women. We do not have programs that specifically address chronic inebriates or drug abuse or mental health, but many of the individuals that we serve have these issues. We refer as many people as possible to the limited resources that are available in the community at other agencies. We also have case management services available to those who request them, and our case management services have recently been overhauled in an effort to engage more individuals and meet them where they're at. So one thing that you need to understand is that BFS is a damp shelter. People are not allowed to drink there, but if they have been drinking, they can come in if they are behaviorally appropriate. If after entering the shelter, an individual becomes behaviorally inappropriate and they refuse to follow staff requests to follow rules or to leave the premises, then the Anchorage Police Department has to become involved. The dramatic increase of people using spice in the last year has had serious consequences both at the shelter and at the cafe. Guests, employees, and volunteers all feel unsafe. In partnership with Beans, we have recently introduced stricter consequences for individuals found to have possession of or to be using drugs. The behaviors prompted by the users of spice, as well as those individuals selling drugs either on the campus or in the immediate area, also require the assistance of APD. Also in partnership with Beans, we have recently introduced joint consequences for other egregious offenses which may or may not stem from the drug use, such as possessing and or using alcohol on the campus, possessing or using a weapon, physical or sexual assault. These joint consequences mean that the individual will not be served at either BFS or Beans for a period of time, and that they may not be on the campus. We are currently working on other lesser violations. We want to present a united front to the community in order to emphasize the expected behaviors. Working on a united campus came after a year of BFS looking at its policies and procedures in light of the increased number of clients over the past couple of years, as well as the increased inappropriate behaviors due to alcohol and drug use by our clients.
Mr. Chairman, I just wondered, you mentioned weapons.
Yes.
Are they allowed to bring any type of weapon into Brother Francis Shelter? Is there a metal detector?
So very interesting question, because one of the things that we have looked at is we say no weapons, and then there's the issue of, but I use this for work, I have to have it. So for the past couple of years, as people have checked in, they've been able to turn in, like a Fisher knife, or we have several people that are cooks who carry their own cooking knives. Just within the last couple of weeks, we have changed that. We have said absolutely no weapons. Even if it's for work, you have to figure out what to do with it. We do not have a metal detector. We do search every person's possessions that come in for drugs, alcohol, and weapons.
Okay, thank you.
And I could just say, add in for the Bean side, that our policy for 35 years has been no weapons in our facility. So.
And that was our policy. We were just skirting around it, trying to help people, but we've had to go back to zero tolerance. We were also looking at the policies and procedures because we felt that we had moved from helping people to enabling people. So the CSS Ethics Committee spent many hours looking at issues of access to the shelter, consequences for poor behavior, the 30-day out policy, and access to basic services such as the bathroom when an individual was not allowed into the shelter. We piloted a program last winter to give people passes when they were 30 days out, trying to engage them in case management services, which we feel is the best way to help individuals move towards self-sufficiency. This year, we will not be giving passes due to the aforementioned revamped case management services. Some snapshots of the behaviors that caused us to look at our policies and procedures were clients standing outside the doors at all hours, holding up their iPhones to say, the temperature is now 45 degrees, let us in. Because if they were 30 days out, we would let them in when it was 45 degrees, the cold weather temperature, and coming in at 2 a.m. after the bars were closed. Due to these issues, last winter, we kept the 11 p.m. curfew during the winter months. If 45 degrees and the maximum capacity at the Brother Francis shelter, which is 240, were not both reached before 11 p.m., we did not use the overflow at the cafe. So this decreased the number of times that we hit capacity at the overflow, which had been quite a number in the 2 previous winters. We have to search every individual, as I mentioned, who enters the shelter for drugs, alcohol, and weapons. Due to budget constraints, we have 2 paid staff, for the majority of the 16 hours that up to 240 guests are in the shelter. When the overflow is used, we add 1 paid staff. We do have volunteers that come from the guests at the staff or at the shelter who assist our staff, but we only have 2 regular paid staff. This is an extremely high ratio for a population that can be volatile. Imagine having a mental health issue, being in a crowd of up to 360 other people who may also have mental health issues or be intoxicated. It's so easy to be set off by someone under these conditions. Our staff do an incredible job of de-escalating many potentially bad situations. We're actually fortunate that the police are not called more often. I'm sure the police will come and talk about numbers. I do have some numbers here. If I remember correctly, the last time we looked at the numbers a couple of months ago, a couple of weeks ago, it was an average of about 8 calls a day.
Yeah, I think it was 1,700 calls so far this year to 911. Now that also, of course, dispatches the safety patrol,
Right.
now that goes through 911 as well.
Right. So we have met with APD, AFD, and the Safety Center more than once in an effort to work more closely for the benefit of our clients. There are gaps in services that leave people out in the cold or without an avenue of safety. So for instance, the Safety Center works under Title 21, and they're only allowed to take people at a certain level. We will take people who are behaviorally appropriate. People who are behaviorally inappropriate may not meet the Title 21 definition, and therefore there's a gap. We have heard more than once that people will drink more in order to get into the Safety Center because they've drunk too much to get into the Brother Francis shelter, and they don't want to be in the cold. These gaps need to be addressed. This summer, we have seen an unbelievable amount of people camping on the sidewalks on Carluck and 3rd Avenue. Both BFS and Beans do trash pickups several times daily because we want to be good neighbors. But we feel that outraged calls from the community almost every day complaining about the behavior of these individuals, the trash, the intoxicated people walking into traffic, the fighting, etc. We've asked the Muni and APD to enforce the no camping and the no sitting laws, but found that they don't apply to our area. The no camping only applies to city parks, and the no sitting only applies to the greater downtown area. So we're sort of in a no man's land. We have no capability legally to ask people to move off the sidewalks, but the community thinks we do. The effects of this many people without proper facilities can only be imagined. BFS has had a protocol to deal with cleaning up human waste for years due to this type of activity on our property. Now this has been expanded to the streets around the shelter and the cafe. Unsanitary conditions exacerbate already existing health issues of this population. The homeless have less access to health care. Many have become homeless due to health issues causing a loss of job, then a loss of housing, as well as insurance, which causes loss of care for the initial health issue. It's just this vicious cycle. Although the shelter has a clinic which is open 3 to 4 times a week and is staffed by wonderful volunteers, it's only for acute care, not for chronic conditions. I don't want to paint the picture that all the guests at the shelter are mentally ill or have drug or alcohol issues, because this isn't true. Many guests come and go in a fairly short amount of time, needing help only as a hand up to get back on their feet. But of the 3,547 individuals served at the shelter last year, 54% have stayed at the shelter at some point for a period of 3 or more years. So these are chronic homeless. That's almost 2,000 chronically homeless individuals. 26% of those over 3,500 individuals have been staying at the shelter for over 10 years, and 5% for 20 or more years. The issue of homelessness is extremely complex. There is no one answer to why people are homeless or why the homeless population in Anchorage is increasing. But the population that we serve just at the shelter alone, not even taking into account families, has increased 12% in the 5 years since fiscal year '09. The lack of housing in Anchorage, the job market, the cost of living, substance abuse and mental health, and the lack of services to address those issues are major factors in answering those questions. The fact remains, however, that many people are homeless due to substance abuse and mental health issues. 25% of the individuals whom the shelter served last year self-reported that they had some type of disability, which includes developmental and/or mental health and/or substance abuse issues. We believe the actual percentage to be higher, possibly as much as 60%. For the chronically homeless, that number could well be almost 100%. The economies of Housing First have been proven with Carluck Manor here in Anchorage and have been noted nationally. Anchorage needs approximately another 100 beds of Housing First for drug and alcohol abusers. That doesn't even take mental health issues into account, although these are often co-occurring disorders. Although this committee is looking specifically into drug and alcohol abuse, I would like to address other issues of homelessness because I think it's necessary. There is really no way in the bigger picture to separate some of these issues. Some people become homeless due to drug or alcohol use, while others begin using drugs and alcohol to deal with the problem of being homeless. I would like to encourage you not to criminalize homelessness. I mentioned the no sitting law earlier. This is actually an example of criminalizing homelessness. It was aimed, basically, in my opinion, at homeless people who have nowhere to be on a regular basis. That being said, however, there is a huge issue that the community needs to address, which is going to be difficult to discuss. And that is how to respond to those individuals who do not want to engage in services to help them become independent and move towards an independent lifestyle. We have seen a huge increase in those under the age of 25, many as young as 18 at the shelter, and many of these individuals could be at Covenant House, but they choose not to be. We have seen a 33% increase in people under the age of 29 in the last 5 years. Many of these individuals are second-generation homeless, spice users, and hopeless. They do not want to work at anything, they just want to hang out. If they can't come into BFS or Beans for some reason, they'll just hang on the street. They want a handout of food, clothing, sometimes a shower. These individuals have to be engaged one-on-one, and it may take years to get them to respond positively, to believe that there's a reason to be more than someone who just sits on the sidewalk. We intend to keep providing emergency shelter as well as the referrals that I mentioned before. We have increased the presence of mental health professionals at the shelter in the last year with help from many partners in the agency. We have weekly outreach from Anchorage Community Mental Health Services. We currently have a mental health intern and a volunteer psychiatrist at the shelter. The listening post is on site twice a week, and a deacon from the Archdiocese is there twice a month. Now, those aren't necessarily mental health, but in talking, many people find a relief that helps them. We have a weekly AA meeting at the shelter, and in conjunction with Beams, we are investigating other options for the clients. We believe that the biggest obstacles to trying to move forward is more substance abuse resources in the community, particularly detox beds. And of course, we can't forget housing. The lack of housing here in Anchorage is absolutely chronic, and it is well past a crisis. And that's housing of all types, but specifically housing first for people with mental health issues or substance abuse issues. We will continue to advocate, and the suggestion that I would make to this committee is that the entire community needs to be involved. There is something known as collective impact, which you may or may not have heard about, but in other areas of the country, they have used this model, which brings an entire community together to address a serious issue, and it has shown in various communities around different topics, not necessarily homelessness, some tremendous impacts in these areas within 5 to 10 years. I think that if we look at that community collective impact model for this community, we could make a serious dent into homelessness, which would be absolutely fabulous. Some other ideas that I would just like to throw out there, again, first and foremost, housing. Not just housing first, but sober housing as well. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, the first thing you need is those basics, and it's very hard for people to think about anything else if they don't know they're going to be safe that day, housed and fed. I know that $4 million has been allocated to the Department of Behavioral Health. My suggestion would be that that go to Housing First and related supported services. I think that would be an excellent way to spend it. Some of the questions that you asked in your pre-handout that I thought about, if you were going to build another shelter, I'm not sure that we really need another shelter, but perhaps it's worth looking at having a female-only shelter for many women who don't feel safe. And let me say that BFS is very safe. We have cameras. There have been no reports of sexual assault inside the shelter, but there are still women who have abused backgrounds who don't feel safe simply in the presence of men. Or perhaps a sober facility where people would not be allowed to have any alcohol in their system. Because we do have many people who don't drink or trying to maintain sobriety and don't want to be around it. But for the Brother Francis shelter to become a dry shelter, we would leave many, many individuals in the cold. I would suggest that as we break down this population, we start trying to address the newly homeless. Don't let it become chronic. Start with the younger people that are not used to being homeless for as many years. It might be easier to change their way of life. And perhaps we should also address the increasing senior population as they typically have more health issues that need to be addressed through specific, more appropriate housing. Those are my ideas. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you. And again, I just want to really reinforce that we're working very closely with BFS because we do sit on one piece of property that's owned by the Muni, and it's critical that we've become a really unified voice to our clients and to the community. So we've worked very hard to get our staff on the same pages and everybody working together. A little bit about Beans Cafe. The organization has been in place since 1979. We are open 365 days a year. We provide breakfast and lunch every day except on Thanksgiving and Christmas, where we just do one feast. We do one big meal on those days. We also provide meals to Carlick Manor every day. So we're averaging right now about 800 meals per day. That doesn't mean we're necessarily seeing 800 people. I would guess it'd be more in the range of, depending on the day, we'll be heading into winter, it'll start to pick up. Yesterday, we probably had about 380 to 390 different individuals. It may have been more, it's hard to say. We do not require the check-in and check-out procedure that BFS does because they're there overnight. It's a much different type of facility. The philosophy of Beans Cafe has always been to have our doors open to anyone who needed a meal and a warm, safe place to be. As such, we don't search people's belongings when they come into the shelter. We don't ask them why they're there. They're not required to sign in to give us specific information. The evidence we have and the information we have about our clients is either anecdotal or it comes from a client services survey that we do annually, which we try and get a representative number of clients to respond to the survey, but it's self-reported. So we know how sometimes that works out. But that's kind of the range there. We do provide day shelter as well. We're open from 7:30 to 5:30 during the week and 8:30 to 5:30 on weekends. We have worked very closely again with BFS to make sure when we close our doors, their doors open so that there's not that gap in services or gap in time for people. We provide client services, including mail pickup, which we consolidated that. BFS was getting mail for clients. We were getting mail for clients. We're working very hard to avoid any duplication of services on campus. We both don't need to be providing healthcare type of things. We're trying to make sure that we're streamlining those efficiencies and making the clients aware of what's available in each facility. Mail is a big one for our clients. I just looked at the mail list for yesterday. We had 384 people yesterday that were on our mail list of having received mail yesterday. So you can imagine the process of trying to sort, manage, handle, and distribute this mail. It's a big deal. And it is the #1 service that our clients say is important to them, other than obviously the meals they receive there. We take it very seriously, and of course we're handling people's personal mail, so it has to be dealt with appropriately. We also provide small comfort items, toiletries, personal hygiene items, bus passes for people who need an opportunity to attend a doctor's meeting, a doctor's appointment. We've been working trying to get the Native Hospital to provide a shuttle. We've been working with them for 6 months. Unfortunately, they have now let us know that they cannot do that for us. So we're still looking to explore alternatives to transport, because literally every day we are sending clients to the Native Hospital, as well as other doctors' offices, job interviews, see their payees, all types of different situations that they need. We also try to be there and be a supportive environment. Many times what we hear from our clients is that they don't feel like people. Nobody will look them in the eye, nobody will talk to them. Having spoken extensively with clients who we really view as success stories, who are now engaged, they're employed, they're living independently, I hear many times from them that it was so hard for them the first time to walk into Beans Cafe and ask for help. But when they did, they found somebody there that was happy to see them, was open, looked them in the eye, made them feel comfortable, and they were able to get the help and the referrals that they needed. So that's really important to us, to be that personal connection. Many times these people literally haven't had anybody treat them like a human being for many years or many months or many days. It depends on the situation. In regards to some of the topics that you had been addressing, our goals with current programs that we're involved in. Again, we're really kind of that safety net of anybody that walks through the doors. As long as you abide by our rules, which are pretty basic and have remained the same for 35 years, we're going to offer you a warm, dry, safe place to be, which is an increasing problem, as Mary Beth mentioned. We are doing some renovations at the cafe that I'll discuss a little further, but we're greatly concerned about the safety of our clients, of our staff, and of our volunteers. We have seen a marked change in behavior in the last year. I really do attribute a lot of it to spice use. It's becoming a situation that Beans Cafe and Brother Francis cannot deal with on our own. We need the entire community's help to deal with these issues. It's alarming and it's frightening. We've had many frightening situations both at the cafe and at BFS, and I'm sure AFD and police department can also attest to some of the encounters they have had with folks who are using spice. It's a real problem. We really try and deal with our clients one person at a time, because ultimately we can only change one person's life a day, maybe in a week, but it's all about that one person approach, and that's really the approach we take. We cannot force services on anyone. We don't provide the case management. Brother Francis does. What we do is we're there to listen and help them provide the appropriate referral when they're ready to seek help. And many times that takes a while, and sometimes they come in the door the first day and they want help. So we're there when they're ready to be assisted. We try to partner with agencies to provide services for our population. This is a major goal of ours, of the organizations. I do not want to start more programs. I do not want to duplicate programs that are in existence. What I want to do is basically throw open our doors and welcome our community partners in to deliver services at the cafe and at Brother Francis Shelter. My philosophy is fish where you know there are fish. If you want to deliver services to homeless and at-risk people, you need to be doing it at Beans Cafe and Brother Francis Shelter. In order to help this along, I don't know how many of you have been to our facility. We basically have one open room downstairs. It is not conducive to having a rape counseling session, a grief counseling, AA meeting, NA meeting, anything like that. So we have taken some unused administration space on the second floor. We received a grant from the Rasmussen Foundation, and we privately fundraised about $60,000 in order to renovate that upstairs area to provide for that conference room space so we can have supportive meetings, not only for our clients, but for our staff. Many of our staff come right up through as clients. They many times start at BFS in-house, working for them, volunteering, doing jobs in-house. Many times if they prove themselves there at BFS that they can be responsible, be reliable, then when we have an opening for a monitor, we will put them on the payroll and help get them. That next step then at BFS is the semi-private housing. Once they have a job that pays, they can move into that, and then on to independent living. We have a wonderful example of that with one of our current employees. He had a heroin addiction for many years. He had worked seasonally as a fish processing person and came back to Anchorage to try and reconcile with his wife and his children. That didn't work out initially for him. He ended up at BFS. In his efforts to stay clean, he started volunteering 5 days a week, 10 hours a day for us as a monitor. And he unfortunately had some immigration issues, so we couldn't bring him on the payroll as soon as we wanted to. But working with Senator Murkowski's office, we were able to help him get those straightened out. He has been clean and sober for over a year. He went through BFS into the Laverna quarters, and now is residing in his own apartment, reconciled with his wife and his children. And it's going to make me cry because it's such an amazing story. And he's probably one of the most well-spoken individuals you'll ever meet. When I actually had a reporter from the New York Times, and when I said, look around the cafe and tell me which one of our monitors you think is currently homeless, and he could not pick them out. So, we have to maintain the dignity of these folks. And sometimes giving them that little hand up and that extra encouragement and helping them navigate through immigration problems or whatever it is will make a difference. And it's truly one person at a time. And his is a great success story, and we're so proud of him. And he's certainly not the only one we have down there, but it's very important. Again, we just want to be able to deliver services to this population. And however we can partner with the agencies that are already providing these services, that's what we want to do. We want to be there, be that place where You know, we already have the VA coming in. We're looking forward to having daily AA meetings. We have one of our staff who's a recovering alcoholic, you know, spent 11 years in prison, former client who's now one of our cooks. He wants to lead those meetings every day because he says it'll help keep him on the right track. So we're reinforcing it both with our staff and with the clients. I think some of the main obstacles that we face, it's the lack of housing, especially the housing first. We've seen the positive impact that Carlick Manor has had. You know, we still do have many of the clients that will come down for breakfast, obviously, and they come down and they help out, and just great success stories we've seen come out of Carlick Manor as well. And hats off to that program and to that team there. You know, we serve not only the homeless, but also the working poor at the cafe. And that's something that's important to remember. Our last social services, client services survey, 17% of the people surveyed reported they had housing. So for a lot of people, there is more month than money. And we typically do see our numbers go up at the end of the month. They may come in and get breakfast before they go to work. They may come in and get lunch on their break. You know, they're trying to hang on to whatever housing they have. So that's an important fact that differentiates us a little bit from BFS as well. I really think that this is such an important forum for the community to understand that it's going to take everyone. We truly need to look at the collective impact model. There is no one reason why anyone needs our services at Beans or Brother Francis. It's a multitude of reasons, and usually every person has several different things that have happened to them to put them in that situation. But I can tell you that there's many more people in our community that today are literally one paycheck, one health emergency, one car accident, or their car breaking down away from needing our services tomorrow. So as a community, we can do better. And I think that we can come together and make a difference and really help those, especially that are willing to engage in the services and take advantage of the opportunities that would be available to them. We also have to deal with the hard question of what to do with the people who don't want to engage. And that's probably, I think, one of our biggest issues facing not only Beans Cafe and Brother Francis Shelter, but the entire community. We know that there are people that no matter what we do, they don't want to come into the shelter at night. They won't abide by our rules at the cafe. They, unfortunately, have lost their way. They've lost their own dignity. They've lost belief in themselves, whether it's a drug or alcohol issue, a mental issue, whatever circumstance put them where they're at. There is still a group of people that really need the most help, and I don't know. I wish I had the answer, because they're going to be, I think, the toughest group.
Particularly the spice users.
Spice users,
because our
especially.
understanding is it changes your brain from the very first time you use it, and you never go back to being the person that you were. So we were having this discussion the other day. What happens after an individual has been using spice for a couple of months or a couple of years and basically can't function anymore? Then what?
And we're certainly, you know, my staff is not prepared to deal with that. Your staff is not prepared to deal with that. We're trying to deliver services to the people who will engage properly with us, follow our rules, and want to move forward with their lives. And that's really our goal, is to help people be that hand up for folks and get them on the right track. As far as you know, future efforts and what plans we have, really the remodel, which the RFP just went out this week for the remodel. We hope to have it done realistically 6 months. But I think that's going to have a huge impact and really encourage, you know, all of our partner agencies and everyone here to contact us and work with us so we can make sure that every day, my goal is that every day we're having support meetings, we're having activities. It's a long afternoon at Beans Cafe. We're busy in the morning, we've got breakfast. Our clients, we have 120 jobs a day that need to be done at the cafe. You know, we serve 800 meals a day with one cook. They don't make themselves, let me tell you. And so we had over 95,000 hours volunteered last year by our client volunteers and about 12,000 hours from outside community volunteers. We couldn't do it without them. But we're busy. It's a hubbub of activity in the morning, getting breakfast out, getting cleaned up, getting lunch, get lunch out, get it cleaned up, and then the afternoon comes. And that's when we see more behavioral issues, more problems. I haven't seen the timing of APD calls, but I would guess a lot more of them happen in the afternoon. And so we're really looking for more ways to keep our folks engaged in a positive activity. So that's a challenge for us as well.
And I think, both Beans and BFS certainly want to be compassionate even to individuals who may not be on a road that we think might be best for them. But there is that issue of when they aren't behaving appropriately, then what happens to them? Particularly from the shelter side, we're supposed to be emergency shelter, meaning you've had an emergency, you don't have a place to stay, you come and stay with us for up to 30 days, which there are exceptions to that. If someone is working on a plan and they're working with a case manager, we'll extend that as long as needed. But so many people, as those individuals that I mentioned before, have turned it into long-term housing. And part of it is because of the lack of housing, part of it can be because of the substance abuse, part of it can be because they are choosing this lifestyle for whatever reason. So again, as Lisa mentioned and I mentioned, it's just very complex. And I think it's going to be very hard for you to pull out just the drug and alcohol piece.
Yeah, there's so many things that have gone into it, the stories we hear from our clients, and on that note too, looking at our client services survey from last year, the clients that were surveyed, 76% of them have been using our facilities for 1 or more years, 38% for 10 or more years. That's not what we want. That's not what we want at Beans. That's not what the community wants. And again, it comes down to the housing, the drug treatment, the alcohol treatment being available for people when they're ready for it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to apologize for being late. And the only comment that I have right now is I really, really appreciate your enthusiasm, your commitment, and your compassion to serving the homeless. It's really, really obvious. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Dabowski?
Thank you. Okay, I first want to go back to the Brother Francis shelter. And I think you both will probably have comments about this, but last year we passed an ordinance to try to shut down the shops that were selling spice. Did you notice any difference after that happened?
I would say not.
Minor maybe, but then they just went to the valley and now that's not in the valley, so they get it online. I mean, we have people literally every day, multiple times, standing across the street from the cafe selling spice. Our staff can tell you who they are, what they look like, what their street name is at least.
License
plate numbers, we're doing our best to not have it on our property, and it is a constant battle. We now have a monitor outside continually when we're in charge of the campus from 7:30 to 5:30. We have somebody outside all the time now.
That leads into my second question. What kind of security do you guys have at your facilities? Do you have, are they volunteers that do security sweeps? Are they?
I'll speak to that first. We have monitors, many of whom were former clients, which is good and bad. It's good for many reasons because A, they know many of the people, they know what to look for, they've been there literally, but some of them also have some personal relationships with some people which we address. But ours are paid staff. We have 4 monitors on at all times unless somebody's out. We have 2 client services people that rotate, so we have coverage 7 days a week in client services. But like I said, we always have somebody stationed outside. There's always somebody at the front desk, and then we usually have 2 people on the floor just keeping an eye on everything. And we've had to increase that number. Previous years, we had 2 or 3 monitors on staff. It's become unsafe at that staffing level to where we've had to increase our staff for our upfront folks to 4 per shift.
Okay, and for Brother Francis shelter.
And so let me say first, and Lisa alluded to this, Beans Cafe is in charge of the campus during most of the day hours, and then at 4 o'clock, Brother Francis takes over for the rest of the night until the next morning. And so, as I mentioned, we have 2 paid staff who are assisted usually by 2 to 4 unpaid volunteers who help. We spend most of our time in the building because that's where everybody is supposed to be. The campus is shut down at 5:30, 6 o'clock. People aren't supposed to be there. We do send 1 staff, paid staff, and 1 volunteer out every hour to go sweep to see that nobody is passed out in a snowbank or that other things are going on.
What about EMS staff?
We have none.
0. And you said you have a clinic that's open 2 to 3 days a week when you have volunteers that come in.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming like nurse practitioners? Or...
Yes, we have a little bit of everything, EMTs, nurse practitioners, PAs. It is open usually 3 to 4 times a week, usually in the evening, although every once in a while we have a daytime clinic. But we do call the fire department or the EMTs quite a number of times. Again, going back to the health issues of many homeless individuals, people are having heart attacks, having trouble breathing. We have many individuals with chronic issues such as epilepsy, and so, you know, we make calls or they make their own calls from their cell phone.
Thank you.
Also, let me just mention on security, and I think I mentioned this briefly, we have cameras throughout the building to give our staff eyes, not ears, but eyes. We do have one camera at our front door. Part of Bean's redo is to get some cameras in the parking lot.
And inside as well. I've spoken with Chief Mew about it. It was something he recommended, and we frequently get calls from, you know, the prosecutor's office asking us to have footage. We've never had cameras at our facility. So as part of our remodel, we will be adding that for increased safety and security.
Thank you.
Any questions? I've got a couple. I guess one of the first ones is the idea that, you know, the increased bad behavior is driven by spice. What is it that is just anecdotal evidence, or you're just hearing that from people? What makes you think spice is the driving force there?
I'm hearing that from my staff. We see a lot of it in searches. People forget they have it or say that doesn't belong to me. We have found them, we have what's known as an open smoking court. So once you come check in for the night, you can't leave. So there's kind of an open smoking court that's contained where they don't leave the building. And people will come and tell us they're smoking spice out there, and you can smell it. It's kind of like marijuana. It has its own odor. And people are afraid when people are smoking spice. I remember, I guess it was about 2.5 years ago, the first time I saw an individual who was reportedly on spice, who was in the building, and he was a young man in his early 20s, and 3 police officers were holding him against the wall a foot off the floor, and it took all 3 of them because he was just, it was unbelievable. We saw somebody, what was it, 2 weeks ago, police were after because she was supposedly on spice and she was running around chasing somebody with a knife. I mean, yeah.
And clients that, you know, we may have had for years that have never had violent tendencies or, you know, had issues like that are acting very different when they're on this substance. And it's very evident to our staff and to our clients. We hear it from the clients, and I've heard a lot from, you know, the older clients. Oh, I tried that once. That was the bad stuff. And the older clients are very afraid of the younger folks that are using it because they behave so irrationally. You know, if they're not on it, they may be fine. And then next minute, they're coming after you with a knife. It's very different behaviors.
One of the rules of this committee when we established it was that we weren't going to be afraid to ask difficult or, you know, maybe not politically correct questions of everybody, and so I want to stick with that rule. But I've heard anecdotally that at the campus, on a regular basis, as sure as clockwork, the spice car pulls up and the dollar shot car pulls up. Is that
across the street from campus? Yes, not on campus.
It's a car that pulls up and will offer shots of liquor for $1.
And at the bus stop, we see them doing that at the bus stop as well, especially with the bottle.
And has, I mean, so we're familiar with these cars, their license plates, everything like that, and it's been
There
provided
are
to the APD?
about 3 cars that I can think of right now that my staff have written down the numbers, told the APD. We've asked APD, come undercover, just sit there and wait for them to come in, you know. And
yeah, we would love to have some type of sting operation or some type of undercover multi-agency possibly, and you know, if we could get 5 or 10 of these people that are the greatest perpetrators of selling it, distributing it off the streets, it would have a marked difference, I think, on what's happening around not only our campus, but around the community area there.
And earlier this year, Lisa and Susan Bomalaski, our executive director, sent a joint letter to the mayor and to Chief Mew asking for police presence on the campus. We do not have any answer yet, but we're pretty sure it's no.
Yeah, we know that the police department is short 50, 60 officers, and we understand that, but when you're having 1,700 911 calls, an ounce of prevention or a pound of cure.
And we were also told a couple of weeks ago that they are now sending 2 police officers to every call because of the behaviors that are going on down.
Mr. Mayor?
The letter never made it to us. Would you give us on the soundbite a copy of it?
Certainly.
And we'll get the attention of the police department. I can't guarantee it, but we'll get their attention.
Well, and let me say, please, that APD has been wonderful.
Yes.
Particularly, we've worked with Sergeant Ryan and Lieutenant Gilliam of the CAP team. They are wonderful. They
Well,
really,
Lieutenant
really
Gilliam is leaving. He's retiring. So
I know. I
we want to
begged
make
him
sure
not
we
to.
get this, because if you're capable of telling us what car, what looks like the license plate number, we should be at least able to stop it for nothing other than a broken taillight and figure out how to stop them selling it.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering, the people that are at the shelter, the Beans Cafe, have to be getting money from somewhere. Is most of this money coming from panhandling? Are they working cash jobs under the table somewhere? Are they on Social Security, unemployment? Where does their money come from?
Yes, 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 and yes. And I couldn't tell you where the majority is, but we have the working poor. They can't afford rent, or can't find a place to rent, can't afford food. We have some who get benefits, Social Security, disability benefits.
Disability.
They'll get a PFD, they'll get native corporation checks. Some of them panhandle, some do jobs under the table, some just borrow money. One of the things that they do with these spice sticks that they smoke is they stand in a little group of 4 or 5, and just like a cigarette, when they don't have enough money to buy a pack, they pass one around.
And I can tell you too, from our client services survey in 2013, 67% of the client survey reported that they were receiving food stamps.
And they will sell food stamps, bus passes, anything else that they might get in order to get these.
And I can tell you too, we do see increased issues around PFD time and shareholder dividend check time. It's a very big concern, and frankly, it's scary to a lot of our clients, because most of them, they don't have bank accounts. So they get their check and they go and they cash it, and they have cash, and other people know they have cash, and it's a huge safety concern.
Some more questions. Quick question. Panhandling was mentioned. One of the other, things I've heard anecdotally was that also the campus is used as sort of a collection point for people that are really organizing the panhandling. The cars come up, certain groups get in, they're distributed throughout the city, they pay money back to these organizers.
Now that's
I have not heard nor seen that. Not to say it's not happening, but I am not aware of it and have not heard about any of it from our staff.
That as I drive through town, I look at the panhandlers, and I usually recognize about half of them.
Yeah, I would say, 30 to 40% I'll recognize as clients, but not all of them, for sure. I wouldn't think maybe half.
Well, let's still stick with that topic. You mentioned before that there's this growing group of younger population you're dealing with that are resistant to, they're not seeking help, they're just hanging out, partying, trying to have a good time. Is that basically the same group that you're seeing the spice activity with?
A lot of them, yes. Yeah. I'd say probably 75%.
Yeah, I would say. And just from our surveys too, again, the 20 to 29-year-old, we had less than 2% of our respondents in 2012. In 2013, it was 7%. And I would guess now we're closing in on 9 or 10%.
On a different topic, You mentioned in some of your ideas for what could be accomplished, additional facilities, more housing first, issues like that. What is the, I guess the plus minuses of, obviously your campus there is sort of, let me refer to it as ground zero for this situation. Anybody who's driven by there realizes that it's really an eye-opening experience. Do you advocate for further services or further support in that same area because you're already good together, or is it more advisable to spread these services out, knowing that there's a transportation issue?
I think you have to be realistic again. If you're going to deliver clients to the homeless population, currently, that's where they are, is mostly between Brother Francis and Beans. You know, as far as new models for down the road, I think that's something that needs a really, collective approach to look at.
So that's a very loaded question.
Yes.
We do realize that that area, there is a huge concentration of services. There is the transportation issue. So at this point, yes, I think any additional services either need to be offered there. As Lisa said, we'll open our doors to any other partners that want to come in and work there. So it doesn't necessarily mean a bigger footprint. Or there needs to be transportation that is available to get them to wherever else the services might be offered.
And a way for them to pay for that transportation if it's on the bus line.
Right.
You mentioned a couple times the success of the Housing First model, what you've seen from Carlick Manor. Can you kind of quantify or objectify for me what it is you've seen that leads you to that conclusion that the Carlick Manor has been making progress?
Well, I don't have the numbers, but I know that there is a report after the first year of Carlick Manor, and it shows the decrease in the number of 911 calls and takes to the hospital, the prison, the safety center for those individuals. If individuals who can't stop drinking for whatever reason are housed, it certainly decreases some of the behavioral issues at the shelter and at the cafe, although as Lisa mentioned, some of them still do come down for meals to the cafe.
And to volunteer, it's their social network. Many of them, we lost a client, Gregory Jack, who had been really a fixture, so to speak, at the cafe. He resided at Carlick Manor, and that gentleman worked more hours at that place than most of my staff. And, we served 31,000 pounds of bycatch salmon last year, and I think he probably personally filleted 29,000 pounds of it. I mean, he just was amazing, and I know how much it meant to him to live at Carlick Manor and have his own place. And unfortunately, right before he passed away, he had just purchased a new recliner. He was so excited, and something that for most people, purchase a chair, big deal. For him, it was a huge deal, and he was very proud of it.
Going back to the health issues, many of those individuals at Carlick, because of their years of abusive drinking, are basically in the end stages of life. And at least having that housing, it gives them a humane, decent, compassionate place, quite frankly, to die. Because we've had a couple of people die in the shelter. That's not a place to be. You don't need to be surrounded by 240 other people when you take your last breath.
If I might, I run the Carlick Manor program, and we did drop off. There is some stats. I can go over them quickly, or we gave them as a handout.
I think we're going to be turning to you for future presentations, if that's okay.
You bet.
Thank you. I appreciate the handouts. Mr. Trainee?
Question for you on the zero alcohol tolerance that the rescue mission has. Have you guys thought about adopting that policy for what you do?
We have, but again, if we go to zero tolerance as the shelter, it's going to leave a large number of people with nowhere to go. because they can't come to us if we go to zero tolerance. Either they can't get into the safety center because they don't hit, the level they need to be at, or it increases their drinking so they can get in. Either way, it's not a good option. So at this point, we really are not going to consider that.
One last question then, at least for me. You mentioned on it, you touched on it a bit, Mary Beth, in your presentation about the concern about going over the line from, assisting to enabling, or can you just expand from where is that line and where?
That's a real wavy line. And quite frankly, it's different for every individual because we do need to meet people where they are. But again, having people come to the door waving their cell phone, it's 45 degrees, you have to let me in, I don't care what time of the day it is and that I've just finished closing down the bars. Okay, by not having the 11 p.m. curfew in the winter, we're letting you go drink for another 3 hours, Until last winter, for the 3 or 4 years prior to that, for some reason, I was not managing it at that point, so I'm not sure what happened. But when it hit 45 degrees, the other thing that we were not applying was that 30-day in, 30-day out. And so people basically lived at the shelter for 8 months. They didn't have to do anything to try to move forward. We said, we can't do that. This is enabling you to drink, to spend your money on drugs, to do whatever you want without having to make any effort to get independent. And so we backed off of that. And so for right now, that's where our line is. And plus going to these much more restrictive rules. It used to be that if we found you with alcohol at BFS, you were out of BFS for a certain amount of time. If they caught you at Beans, you were out of Beans. Now you're out of both. You have nowhere to sleep and you don't get food at Beans.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid the, go ask your mother if you don't like the answer you got from dad, because that's what we were seeing. We're trying to really present that unified voice to the clients.
As I stated previously, we do have some representatives from the fire department who I'm told might have a few comments for us anyway today, and would like to invite you up if you would.
That's great for not quite so comprehensive. So I'm John Judowski, Deputy Chief of Administration, Fire Department. Jim Vignola, Deputy Chief of Operations. And I was a little remiss. I didn't realize this committee was being formed until just 2 days ago. But this topic is a very hot topic at the fire department. I think it's been well established. There's a lot of calls to public inebriates and homeless people here in Anchorage. It represents a large portion of our call volume. I think they've also, the folks before us, established that there's a large number of calls that occur at the BFS Beans complex. We'll go to that complex 3 to 4 times a day, a shift. And in that geographical area, that grid will go to about 1,500 times a year. And that would actually be more calls than several of our fire stations in our outlying areas that they would respond in the whole entire area. So we've been contemplating ways to work on this issue. And we recently met with Melinda, the new director of the health department, to banter some alternative models for dealing with this. She expressed that this committee was formed and be informed that maybe we would want to be part of it. So Jim and I both been with the fire department for 24 years. We spent a lot of years working at Station 1 ourselves, so we're very familiar with the problem, the issue firsthand. And I think we both have quite a bit of passion, and we're looking for alternate ways to handle these. I think that we totally believe in the idea that we want to solve it at the root, i.e. give them housing and jobs and all that, but we know that that's not always going to work. And I guess from the fire department's perspective, the problem that maybe we want to take a different look at is today there's only one route. 911 is called, we drive a vehicle to the location, we ask what your problem is, they give us us a problem, we load them in the ambulance, we drive them to the ER. And it's just a big circle, vicious cycle. And I don't think they're getting any help. We're not contributing to solving the problem in any way, shape, or form with this loop. And Dr. Levy, our medical director, who's also ASP's medical director, is very in tune with this issue. He's a doctor at regional hospitals, so he receives these folks on a regular basis. So he could probably explain better what happens on that end. But my understanding is just a big revolving door. And so we're very interested in looking at more creative, more innovative ways to contribute to better healthcare, better reduction of the problem.
Looking at thinking outside the box, and there's a lot of other communities with the same problem, not only within the state of Alaska. In fact, I was just on a conference call this morning with the Alaska Fire Chiefs Association. Juneau's looking outside the box as well to try to resolve some of the issues that they have. Fairbanks has these issues. We're prone to it. Those larger cities are prone to it a lot because the root problem stems from where those individuals come from generally, in general terms. They don't have the resources to deal with them in outlying Alaska. In some of the smaller cities, the smaller communities, they come here, and the problem grows. For us, thinking outside the box means instead of just responding, you call 911, we have a duty and obligation, a legal responsibility to respond. You want to go to the hospital, you tell us you want to go to the hospital, we have a duty and obligation and responsibility to transport you to the hospital of your choice and where you want to go. There's no way around that. If you don't want to go, we can't force you to go. But most of the time, there are abuses within the system that are utilized. People understand if they call us, we go, we pick them up, we can take them to A&MC, and there are times where they'll walk right in and right out the door, and it's a bus. Our ambulance just became a bus. It's happened, doesn't it? I can't tell you how many times. I don't think it's very often, but it does happen. At the same time, they'll get there, they'll have their bed, a meal, not really have an issue and move forward. Where they do have issues, they have those mental health issues and those other things that they're not. There's just not the capabilities, or we don't have the capabilities within the city to resolve. So some of the things we're looking at, when we talk about looking outside the box, are community paramedicine, which is basically, there's different ways that that's being instituted across the country. Some of them are being instituted within the fire department itself under a fire EMS-based model, where the paramedic is an advanced practice paramedic who can respond. They'd have their own vehicle, no lights necessarily, no sirens, but they would respond to these calls or these types of incidents where they can evaluate the patient and see if it's really something that's necessary for a transport, to say, okay, yeah, you probably should go to the hospital, but here's a taxi voucher. Or we have another setup to where we have a service to bring them to the hospital if necessary. Or here's, here, do this, take your blood pressure, go lay down and rest, we'll get you in the clinic tomorrow. There's a lot being done. It's a big problem across the country, let alone across the state, let alone across our city itself. So lots of solutions out there that people are working on. It's kind of a hot topic right now, so to speak. There are some larger communities down in the States that are actually have functioning programs that are working similar to this. And one of the things we talked about is trying to implement something like this at Brother Francis Shelter, at Dean's Cafe, where during the day they can actually talk to these individuals while they're more lucid, while they're more awake, while they're active and eating it up, whereas opposed at night where they might go to sleep or be out in the woods camping or wherever else they might be. So, lots of ideas out there. It's just a matter of, it's really nice to see this this group get together and let's look at it from a collective whole as opposed to piecemealing all parts, trying to piecemeal it together from different agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being here, both of you. And you talked about the fact that 4 times a day you're called.
3 to 4.
3 to 4. Right, you did say 3 to 4. 3 to 4, and then 1,500 times a year. So my question is, how many of these are non-emergencies? Are you able to?
Probably the majority. And, as an outcome of our meeting the other day with the health department, we're gonna start to compile more data and try to answer those kinds of questions, so.
What are the high acuity calls versus the low acuity calls?
Right.
The hunger pains, my stomach aches, which could be one of anything, of course. It could be they need food, or it could be they have a bleeding ulcer, or, I mean, you know.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
I think some of our ideas are to, how can we have other alternative places to do something with these folks, you know? Does the ER have to always be the only place they have to go? Maybe we could treat them right there where we're at. Maybe there's a clinic. And I didn't realize there was even a clinic down there until just this week. How can we expand maybe those hours? I don't know.
Hospitals have a vested interest in this as well, especially the emergency rooms.
So I guess I'll give you two final thoughts or so. Wait.
Just a quick question. We knew you guys having to burn out with the paramedics at Station 1, so we supported the chief moving paramedics from Station 9 to 4 or 1.
Station 12.
Station 12.
12, sorry.
Station 4.
So how is it working for you guys? Is that helping at all?
Yeah, that overall move was to move another transport unit, another medic unit technically north of International. We say Tudor because it makes a nice clean line delineating north and south of Anchorage. Basically, 80% of our responses, our medical responses, occur north of International Road. So a lot of that is based on, you know, when you look at start digging down into the numbers and you look at in one grid within the city, we have 1,500 responses in that one grid a year. So what we are seeing is our response times are getting better to those calls. The call volume is being handled by, you know, the slack is being picked up, but we're also noticing that we've had to change some other practices with Medic 7 and Medic 9 and having them respond into 12's area to accommodate what we call the code yellow responses, the non-emergent. These are your non-cardiac events, your non-stroke events, your non-trauma events. These are someone calling because they're sick. You know, they're able to talk and breathing. So it's just better utilization of our resources. And it's only during those peak hours of the day that we've identified, which is noon to 7.
Did you have? I was going to say just two other things. I'm just express my support for this one objective, have a bias toward action. So how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? In the fire department, we take a very much, let's try something like this Medic 12 thing. Let's try something, see if it works, see if we see some improvement. We'll refine it. Maybe we'll stop doing it if it doesn't work. So we can come up with some ideas. We would be very excited to try something. And then the last comment, I was just going to point out something here. There's questions that at some point you'll probably get to, but what have been some successes? One of the things we did do in the last year is the fire department started dispatching for ASP, CSP, and I want to believe it's been a success, even though there's been some growing pains, some things that were unexpected. But overall, the point of that whole process change was to get the right resource there. And so previously, you could have somebody call the CSP center, the safety center directly. Another person could call 911, which would then elicit a response, multi-agency response from APD, fire, and CSP, and it was just wasteful. So now we have this better coordination between the three agencies, and our dispatchers are triaging, and sometimes we take 911 calls that the van, the ASP van can handle, and that will avoid sending fire resources. Conversely, we may, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen, where maybe someone has called the safety center number and we've deemed it's actually a patient that should be seen by an EMT or paramedic. And so just a lot better oversight, we have a lot better data because it's all being tracked and collected now in our computer dispatch. And so I'm very happy. And I know Senator Dembowski, LV, and Mr. Trainee have all been to dispatch to see the system, so I'm not sure who's been here, but you're welcome to come, and it's a very enlightening experience, I would say. You'll watch the CSP call process. It's pretty amazing what some of these folks are calling in and reporting and how the interactions go. So, Ms. Dembowski.
Thank you. I think what I'm gathering from this discussion, I mean, there's two things that I think probably are requirements in order to decrease the response to public safety assets. Number one is exactly what you said, diversionary locations. If it's not something that really has to go to a hospital, where are other locations that we can find? Maybe people can get treatment for what they actually need. The other is, it's something that I had suspected in the beginning, but I think I'm thinking is becoming more and more of a need, is on-site medical care of some sort that can filter out the non-emergent calls from the real emergent calls. I know as a municipality, we do a lot of community grants. I don't know if anything like this is part of that. I don't think it is, but I think we need to step back and look at how expensive these resources are and how best we can treat people. And if we can treat them on site for something, it's far cheaper and more effective. It's faster if they can get that versus transporting them. You're never going to eliminate all those calls because you'll still have the people who want to get a ride over to MC or wherever they want to go. But at the same time, we'd probably filter out quite a few of them if we look at those two things.
I completely agree. If we had that resource available at the sites, at Brother Francis, at Beans, at where these areas, whether it's advanced practice paramedicine, whether it's a PA, whether it's a nurse, having that there for them to triage those calls and also be able to treat the more minor, stomach aches, aches and pains that don't necessarily need emergent care.
I think from this community, this perspective, I think we have to get a handle on what resources are out there that we may be able to harness from a community standpoint to put in those facilities, or from our perspective, that investment I think is far cheaper than using public safety resources on a much bigger scale. So that's something that I would like to explore.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. We have a at UAA, they have a large people that are being trained to be nurses, and I would imagine they're getting training beyond that, some to become nurse practitioners. And I would think spending hours in a clinic treating the homeless would be some amazing experience for them to get to perfect their craft, so to speak. And so we might want to contact UAA. Or
Actually, that's where most of the people staffing our clinic come from. The WAMI students are there. Yeah, so that's where most of them come from.
Additional Department of Health and Human Services has a clinic too, and I don't know what opportunities we might have to explore the opportunity of extending that clinic's hours and having off-site locations.
They actually come down a couple of times a year and do inoculations and TB testing.
I did know that, actually, yeah. I was gonna say, but one of the discussions we have is why reinvent the wheel? Why not tap into the resources we have? And that might mean augmenting those resources, but if they're already there and functional, that could be an opportunity.
And Melinda Freeman, who just took over Department of Health and Service, is involved with us now, and she's been very helpful already and plans on attending and assisting. Is she in already?
She was. She left.
Okay. She comes and goes like the wind. But she's very, very eager to help us, and so we'll be in coordination with them as well. Rosalie?
One of the things that the committee needs to really keep in mind is that the state has reduced funding over the years for substance use. I'll give you an example of what that means. Aquila House received, and I remember this because it was the year I went to work there, $692,000 for Aquila House in FY92. This year, we had a big increase. We got $15,000 over that 692. We can't serve the same number of people with the same money that we received 22 years ago. And that's not unique to us. The treatment needed by this group of people is residential treatment. They are not in a position to respond to outpatient treatment. We could maybe do a shorter period of residential than we used to do, and transition them to some intensive outpatient. But this is a group that will not get its act together without substance use treatment. And the laws have changed now so that all of us who provide either mental health or substance use are really required to provide behavioral health. So we have mental health clinicians on site because it's required. And that's without more money. We've had to put mental health clinicians on site. The example of that is that we used to have 40 people. When I started working there, we had 40 people a day was our population. It's now 18. And we have this empty building because we're down to 18.
And we certainly are going to be reaching out to the providers of these services, substance abuse and mental health and all.
Many of the providers that used to do sort of private service have gone out of business. They're just not there anymore. So it is compounded in any number of ways.
Any other questions for the clerk?
Thank you.
I just want to say, I am personally excited that you guys are looking into outside the box ideas. I think that's exactly what's needed. We want to stay in contact with you, and there's no idea that we don't want to hear about that you come up with, so we appreciate it, and thanks for being here.
The meetings will be once a month?
Once a month, and we'll make sure you're on notice. And
One thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Payne?
Do you guys have anything on the community paramedics you were talking about? Is that a model that you've got information on?
There is a model that, actually I'm looking at trying to go down to Washington. We're having a big conference, or 2-day conference in December. I was trying to get down to, there's a lot of information out there. It's like I said, it's a newer concept, but there are communities out there that are practicing it and it's working for them. I believe Houston just started a program. Like I said, these are large. And I can get that information for you.
If you would, please. I was looking on my access, but it's hard reading on a tiny screen. So if you've got it, please get it to us.
I will. I'll get it to it.
Thank you.
If you can get any documents, if you get them to Ms. Moser at the clerk's office, she'll coordinate and get everything to us.
Okay. It'll all be emailed, so.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Next thing on our agenda was partner feedback, and what that was referring to is we sent out a couple of questionnaires to different agencies and groups and organizations, asking a few basic questions. We've gotten some responses back. We still want to get more before we analyze what that says. So, but I just want to let everybody know that if you haven't gotten the questionnaire yet, you probably will, or if you would like it, just let us know and we'll get it to you. We're still, desperately trying to identify everyone that we should reach out to. So if we haven't reached out to you, let us know and we'll take care of that. So member comments, that's for the committee. Are there any comments in general? Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that, as we all know, this is a community issue. It's not an issue for the police department, the fire department, the assembly, or the mayor. It's a community issue. And I'm really happy to see the audience, so many folks here from different segments of our community. I really appreciate that because that's what it's going to take in your participation. So I look forward to seeing you, at every meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I think it's apparent, and we probably already knew this before, that this is not just a problem here in Anchorage, it's a statewide problem and probably a nationwide problem. And so the fact that there are other cities that maybe have some programs that are working, that have been developed and that are in the process of being developed, we definitely want to make ourselves aware of those to see if they might be able to work here in Anchorage. But the problem has been and probably will continue to be getting the funding we need for the programs that we decide will actually work here. The fact that Aquila House is down to less than 50% of the staff they had 20 years ago, with more people to treat. You don't have to be a genius to see that we're not going to make progress solving problems without the funding to make it happen.
Mr. Bosky?
I always have something to say. The three things, I liked how our format was today, where we focused on one topic, essentially. And I think as I was listening, there's three topics that over the next few months I would obviously like to focus in on. Housing, obviously, being one. The CAP team, I would like to really explore this. And part of it is I'm hearing about the online sales, and I'm hearing about local, stepped up, focused efforts. I know that works with traffic issues, so I would assume it would work with drug dealing issues too. But the other is healthcare, with our community partners, different options, maybe different grant options, whatever it can be. But I think one thing that we can definitely do in a relatively short time is some of these tweaks to Title 21 that they were talking about. It sounds like that is going to be something that we could do. So we'll have to figure out exactly how to approach that one. But those are things that I'd like people to start thinking about. I think if we break it down into subcategories and start attacking it piece by piece, it'll be a little more effective.
Mr. Chairman, I just thought of one additional thing. They mentioned that they think the spice is coming in from via the internet. In other words, it'd be shipped up via the U.S. mail probably. Well, obviously, that's a federal crime. So I think it's interstate commerce and interstate crime, so the FBI might be able to get involved.
It's not a federal crime.
It's legal in other states. So it's not
Spice is legal?
Yes.
In other states?
Really? Was it?
Yeah, right. That's unfortunate, but.
Well, that's why I think we can deal with some state legislators too.
All right.
I don't know
Anyway, that
what,
was
but
just-
it'll have to be.
Eventually, the other states are going to make it illegal too, because they're going to start having the problems that we're having already.
There's an article on a TV news magazine about the dangerous problem with spice in Lower 48. We've had that problem for a couple of years. It's just nice to know the Lower 48 is finally getting on track with it. Let's hope we have something being done federally, because there isn't right now.
And from our perspective, this is why it's our responsibility to engage our federal representatives, our statewide representatives, because we handle local, state handles state, they handle, but, there's nothing saying we can't put some pressure on.
We have a lot more disposable income here, unlike other states. We got a PFD coming up in October, and that's going to be a massive influx of money that people just in this lifestyle choose to spend it doing whatever they can. Spice just it flows when that happens.
Do you have any other comments, Mr. Payne?
Sure, sorry.
Ms. Greer Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really glad that the issue of this, being illegal in other states came up, and I appreciate Ms. Dombrowski's comments, because yes, we do have federal representatives, and we need to have some conversation with them sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just want to thank everybody for being here. I know you're probably biting your tongues because you want to jump in the conversation and have a lot to say about these issues, so I appreciate your restraint. We do have some time for comments. I think you're getting a sense of how this is going to look, and we're not still written in stone here, so we may adjust our format to see what works. And we're just looking for what's going to work. So any ideas you have, please let us know, but we're willing to hear from you now, briefly, if you would. Mr. Evans in the back, and then...
Yeah, just to speak on the spice issue, I've been involved in it. I spoke at the assembly meeting the first time.
Please stand up, Corey.
The situation that they talked about at Beans Cafe, that is being addressed. The CAP team took on the shops, and all the shops got shut down. It hasn't been released to patrol yet, for a patrol to actually start making stops of people that are selling across the street. So that's the niche that hasn't happened yet, which Chief Mew says it's happening soon. He was waiting to get the 16 officers that just came out of camp. So now that he has more officers, it's going to be released. They're still in training, getting that extra training, because there were some issues with the CAP team going in and touching base with certain shops and grabbing stuff that wasn't legal.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Corey? No, you do security for Downtown Partnership, right?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Corinne O'Neill. I'm the Director of Supportive Housing for Rural CAP. And I think we have a lot of information on homelessness. We've been engaged in the issue a long time. We're the owner of the sort of infamous Carlick Manor, and 129 other units of supportive housing. So we'd love to do a long and extensive presentation before the Assembly Committee. Unfortunately today, Rural Cap is looming, and I think the community is looming on a crisis where we're about to lose 100 units of housing for people that are homeless. And so I'd just like to briefly talk about that today, because it's a looming crisis in really in a couple weeks for us. So I think many people know the 100 units that Safe Harbor Inn owned. They have not been operating effectively a long time for the homeless community. They put out an RFP last winter for a nonprofit to take over those 100 units. Without any additional operating resources, Rural Cap really felt that there was value in saving those resources, and agreed with the idea that we were going to have a partnership with Anchorage Community Mental Health Services to help bill Medicaid for some of the most severe people that we could take off the streets. Unfortunately, there was a large compliance audit of Medicaid, and also you should be aware that Medicaid revenue is also supporting some of our most severely disabled at Carlick Manor. And a service that we were billing called Recipient Support Services is generally on hold. We have a $700,000 operating deficit for keeping those units serving people with special needs who are very difficult in our community. If not, we're not kicking anybody out, but we will have to sort of change the course of that housing. So I think we generally have two asks. We brought a lot of information today. I know it's a little bit overwhelming amount of information, because Medicaid is a very, like any health insurance policy, is very complex issue. We are kind of asking the Assembly Committee to help us ask DBH for some of the $4 million that Fairview lobbied for to help us shore up the operations of Safe Harbor immediately. And we also are asking the Assembly Committee to work with us on rate reform for Medicaid long-term for supportive housing to serve some of our most severe mentally ill people. Rural Cap cannot expand the operations. There are not the resources. We maybe could build more housing, acquire more housing through capital dollars, but without dealing with the Medicaid issue, we cannot afford to operate any more supportive housing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corinne, you were talking really, really fast.
Yeah, I know.
I talk fast too. It's an East Coast thing. But anyway, we talked about asking for our support and requesting money from an agency that I didn't know.
Division of Behavioral Health, State of Alaska. We're asking you to talk to the commissioner, to talk to the director. There was an appropriation of $4 million to assist public inebriates within Fairview. We're asking so that we don't end up on a precipice of a crisis to help us with some of those dollars for operating.
Okay, so do you think that a resolution from the Assembly in support of this would be good?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
So I think that would be a really great first step for this committee to do. And then we can, on the sidelines, talk, to the agencies, but I think that would be a really great first step for us to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you. Who is controlling that? I know about the $4 million, but I'm not sure I know the details of who's got that money.
The Division of Behavioral Health for the State of Alaska. We'd like them to issue an RFP or a NOFA or competition for supportive housing.
Ms. Zabowski?
Corinne, do you know exactly how that $4 million, have they already itemized how they're supposed to be, they're going to use that money?
No. I think there's been, maybe other people know more. I think there's talk of ACT teams, which are sort of community treatment teams, intensive case management teams, or outreach teams, which are teams that can work. What we need is the service treatment dollars in housing, and those types of services work within supportive housing.
The reason I ask is because they have $4 million, but they've already figured that we're using this much for this much. I just need to understand that first.
No, and the last that we heard, which I think was last week from Melinda, it has not gone out for RFP yet, but they want to put it out for a collaborative community effort around this. So they have not decided what they're spending it on yet.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Paul Foos, project manager with the Fairview Business Association. I was a person in Juneau that helped put this money through. And one thing that we promised the legislature is that this would be a coordinated, case-managed program that would address the substance abuse, the alcohol problems, and the things that are at the root of the behaviors that we see from people. This is different than homelessness. There's about 4,000 homeless. There's about 300 to 400 chronic inebriates that are out there that I bet are 95% of the calls that the fire department is responding to. Not the general homeless and not the disruptive, they're not being picked up. That's the target of this. And the reason that we were able to get that money is because they said, look, everybody's come to us for this and a little bit here and a little bit there. It's like a black hole. We've dumped the money into it. Pete Kelly from Fairbanks said, I've been gone from the Senate for 20 years. I come back and we're still exactly where we were before. So to try to peel this off for housing money, housing is part of it, but it needs to be outreach, detox, and you're right, we don't have enough detox beds. People come in and say, I'm ready to quit drinking. Well, I got a 5 to 6 week waiting list. Well, that's a perishable decision. They're going to be gone. They're not going to come back. Rehab, job training, and this is the Partners for Progress and reentry. There has to be some responsibility. That's a source of self-worth for people. And then transitional housing for people to go into so they can get back on their feet. If we don't have this, we're not going to get anywhere. The last 3 people that died on the streets here were residents of Carlick Manor. One of them, a great story in the newspaper, she was just using it as a base of operations for drinking. Every single day she was out on the street at 13th and Gamble. We didn't solve any of that by that. So, when you look at this and you mention what other cities have done, you've got the serial inebriate program in San Diego is a great example. What they have done through increased enforcement. When you have serial, it's misdemeanors, but it's like, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 a year. Once you have enough, they say, okay, you're either going to prison or you're going to go to treatment. One way or another, we're going to dry you out to where you can start to think about what you're doing. And all the evidence-based programs show that whether I decided I want to quit drinking or I was forced into it, there's no difference in the success rate. No difference. So, we just have to take a stand as a community. This is unacceptable to us. This is the most humane. We've got to keep I thought I was going to come to speak on chronic inebriates, and they started talking about fishing. Well, that's something I do know something about. We have to keep the safety net from becoming a cod end that people can never escape from. We've got to give an escape hatch out. That's what that money is for. And I did bring an email, I'll just drop it off to you, basically from the director saying, I'm coming out with the RFP in October. Let's give that a chance to work and see and do a unified program. We're glad to go back and support more money for housing or whatever else it takes. One threshold we did cross last year, we were able to use alcohol tax money for this. And it had never been set aside like this before. The other thing was in the capital budget, we were able to use it for operating funds. We need to continue that. That's why we invited the governor to Fairview. You were there, Assemblyman Evans, and heard him say he would stand behind us on this. But this is part of a long evolution. We start picking this money apart and sending it here and there, we're not going to be successful, and we're going to lose our credibility with the legislature.
I have Ms. Dombowski, the gentleman in the back, and then the Lucky Wishbone, for lack of a better name.
Quick question. So, Mr. Hughes, one of the things that we heard come up was the need for 100 detox beds, essentially, which seems like it would be ripe for exactly what you were talking about, groups coming together, being able to provide treatment, whatnot. Do you not see this as an opportunity to use Safe Harbor Inn as a potential for those detox beds where we can center the treatment around?
Ma'am, these are not detox beds. Detox is physical, medical detox. If you're coming off of heroin, you're going to be miserable. You're coming off of alcohol, you're going to die. And I don't know what is a 9 or 10 day process or something like that of medical. It's more like a medical facility. And we only have 12 beds here in Anchorage. I heard Salvation Army was looking at Clitheroe of bringing that back online. That's probably good. Fairbanks has 20 beds. So this is ridiculous. This is part of what that money has to go into. So that's why we're hoping a consortium of these groups will come out on this RFP and say, I'll help handle this. We realize what the workload is. If we can put restrictions on the people that are repeat offenders on their ability to buy alcohol, we can give them a choice, you're either going to prison or going to treatment. But the treatment has to be there. We can't in good faith say that. we're going to make those restrictions if we don't have the treatment available. That's what the $4 million is for.
Gentleman back.
I'm going to supersede S just by... I'm Heidi Heinrich. I'm the president of the Fairview Business Association, as well as the general manager of the Lucky Wishbone. Assemblywoman Dombrowski, you were present for one of our 11 presentations throughout this municipality.
It was great.
And we got unanimous support from every single community council we went to, because it isn't just Fairview that's dealing with this issue. It's the entire community. And what we promised each and every one of these communities was this coordinated effort. That's what makes this special, is this is something that has not been done before. It is not just detox, it is not just treatment, it is not just job training, it is not just housing, it's not just outreach. It's all of those things in combination. And when we went to Juneau, that's what we sold to the legislatures, and that's what they put their money in. That's what they advocated for, was for this particular approach. Do we believe that Rural CAP and the Housing First program is necessary? Absolutely we do. But when we went asking for $5 million, and they told us our reach was too high, and maybe take it down $1 million and put housing off until next year, because our program wasn't going to be ready for housing until we figured out what our outreach was, what our detox was, what our treatment was. 12 beds for detox in this town. How many people are you serving? When they come to you today and say, I'm ready, what do you do with them? Because we don't have a place to put them. They need all of the other services. They need the medical facilities. Without question, Brother Francis and Beans needs help. It is a bigger issue than anybody can handle. And we believe in the housing, we do. But it's got to come after everything else that we promised this community and we promised those legislators we would produce from this program. It's meant to be a group effort where each one of these social services does their part. I heard you say several times it needs to be a one-on-one effort to treat these individuals. We can't just say, okay, your detox now, show up on Thursday to see so-and-so and we'll continue treatment. Thursday doesn't come. They're lost between today and Thursday. It has to be one-on-one case managed, and that's what we promised. Eventually, we're looking at housing, but they also need the job training so that the services provided by Brother Francis and Beans are not necessary. They will have a job, they will have housing, and they will be healthy individuals to try and continue to lead a healthy lifestyle. To put someone in housing without all of the bases to keep them going continues to recycle the issue. We're right down there. We know we're going to continue to support all of the efforts, but this is what we promised, and that's what that $4 million was set aside for. And the commissioner has promised that we will have community input on how these funds are handled. And this is the community. You were glad to see us here. We're here. This is what we want. We want treatment.
Thank you. We got a bunch in a row. Sergi, still?
Yeah, if I may, thank you. My name is S.J. Klein. I'm immediate past president of the Community Council of Fairview, which is the home of what you call Ground Zero. Before, it's interesting. My father was on a commission that dealt, or a task force that dealt with this in the late 1980s. And he's been on several since then. A lot of times what these commissions and task forces are doing is saying, okay, here's the problem. We have 450 chronic inebriate, chronic homeless right now in Anchorage. Let's take care of those people. And kind of what that's resulted in, if you look at the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority budget over the last 10 years, every year they direct about $200 million of state funds and another $50 million that they direct themselves. And great programs are established and which deal with this problem right now. But there's really, when we were on the bus, I talked about there's this flow of individuals coming into this world, and there's a flow of individuals out, and there's this pool that are here right now. And if you want to solve the pool, you have to deal with upstream and downstream. And so I guess this initiative, which I wasn't really expecting to speak to, but the $4 million that is being suggested to be redirected, the idea of that was to really kind of take a different approach than saying, okay, there are these programs, let's fund them, create these silos. Instead, let's create a system where we can identify individuals and try and help them out of the pool. And so I guess, you know, I would implore you to sort of like, if we're talking about thinking outside the box, let's keep that 4 million for doing something different. There's also an issue of kind of this concentration of social services and the issue that, you know, kind of like services get provided in an area because that's where the individuals are. You know, the problems that Mary Beth and Beans Cafe are kind of having with what's going on outside of their property is really because of that concentration of social services, and it's inhumane to the people who are in that world. You know, I mean, if you want to get out of a mess, the first thing to do is get away from the mess. You know, I mean, there are 300 scattered site homes in Anchorage, or scattered site beds in Anchorage right now. I mean, there definitely need to be more. You know, they take a lot more work to do case management, but they're effective. Mental health trust authorities' own research says it's the most effective way to get people better. You know, I mean, it's a problem that being the neighbors of the highest concentration of the problems, I mean, between across the street from the campus and then at 13th and Gamble, between those two, those are the two highest uses of emergency calls in the city. You know, I mean, it's our home and these are our neighbors, and we're very compassionate towards them. But we've spent $250 million in the last 10 years trying to fix this problem, and it's gotten worse. So, yeah, I really look forward to the work that this group does.
I've got Pete, Amy, Ms. Gray Jackson, the gentleman from Carlick, Rosalie, and my friend from Mountain View. Joel. Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to say that I wanted to point out that there was a difference between the Red Roof Inn and Safe Harbor. Safe Harbor has been established as a place for non-inebriates, for many times young families, single women with children, or entire families that just became homeless. And so I just wanted to make sure that we knew that there was a differentiation between housing and Red Roof Inn, that it was set up for inebriates, and the Safe Harbor, which was set up for more family situation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to set the record straight. I was not familiar with the $4 million grant. We have so many other things we're dealing with. I just wasn't. But I would love to see a copy of the approved grant request, just so I can read what it's all about. And I really, really appreciate the conversation, because when Corinne stepped up to speak, my thought was that it was something that was specifically for rural Cap, frankly, okay? And so I misunderstood. And so with that said, what can we do to help rural Cap? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Carlick Manor, I think you're next in the queue.
Sure. So one of the things that I want to clarify too is that I'm Kenny Scollin, and I'm with Rural Cap. So part of the thing is that Carlick Manor is working. It's working well. We have 90% of our people stay there over 6 months, and 78% over a year. So that's more than they've stayed in many places before. When they first came into our program, the criteria to get them into the program, they, as a group, they are responsible for probably 4,600 interactions with the fire department, CSP, emergency rooms per year. Right now, our emergency calls are down to 73 a year, and we expect that to be even lower. We're not asking for the money or support for Carlick Manor. Carlick Manor is working. We have funding for that. We're having some issues with the Medicaid billing, but that's besides the point. We went into this Safe Harbor program to save 105 units that not only deal with families, but they deal with a group of people with severe mental illness that stay at the Merrill Field property. What's happened is, over the years, that program was a great program when it first came out. Lynn Ballou, who started the program, retired. She was the executive director, she was the HR department, she was the accounting department. She didn't take a salary, and she lived on site. Okay? When they had to replace her, they had to pay for all these services. As a result, they were losing $100,000 a year. They pay their folks $9 an hour to take care of those people. When we came on board, our base salary is 14 something an hour, and our fringe rate is 39%. So just the fact that we take it over, Rural Cap will be investing $250,000 of their own money to keep those programs going for the first year. If we don't get some support, I mean, we don't want this to happen, but what could happen is we can have 105 units of this type that deal with, we had over the past, the demographics were over the past 2 years, 170 children were served under the age of 5 in those programs. There's been, right now, the families over at Merrill Field, you know, they average about 3 people per room, per hotel room. At Muldoon. Over at Merrill Field, it's mostly single individuals that suffer from a mental illness. So it is imperative because it will add to the population that's on the street. Some of these people, it's sober housing, but they do have alcohol issues, they do have drug issues, and they're trying to work on it. Part of what they're doing there is transitioning into permanent housing. If we lose those houses, that stock of housing, it'll be devastating. Social services is treatment. Part of what we will do is outreach. Part of what we will do is set aside beds for this population. So it's not for the housing. We have the housing, they pay the rent. It's for the services surrounding the housing that makes it successful. So that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. And I just want to say, just echoing my comments from the beginning, we are not at anywhere near the stage where we're going to start selecting solutions to any of these problems. We are at the stage of we're just trying to learn what the problems are. There's a number of different agencies out there working this problem, and they have, you know, their own agendas, and they're doing a great job, and sometimes they're competing with each other. I know Carling Manor's doing great stuff, Rural Cap's doing great stuff, Aquila House is doing great stuff, but we're not anywhere near the point of where we're going to start picking and choosing winners, losers, or who we're going to...
Just asking for the request for proposal to come out so we can apply.
Right, and that's going to be a state. I mean, I don't think we want to get in between that. They went to the state for the money. The state is issuing the money. We're not in a position, I don't believe, to start saying what they should do with that money. Hopefully someday we'll be better for that. But really quickly, Rosalie, and then...
I was asked, along with Heidi, to testify before the legislature on this particular request. We had a panel of us that were there and testified, and the legislature was very clear. They wanted it for treatment and supportive services, which would be case management, perhaps some mental health, those kinds of things. Housing was specifically not included in that. Now, do I think we need housing? Absolutely. You would never hear me say that we don't need. Our people coming out of long-term treatment are desperate for housing, and that's what helps keep them clean and sober. But this particular money was not designated by the legislature for housing. So I would suggest that we all need to put our heads together and look at, are there some other resources to help support housing?
And we will be getting to all those issues as this year-long or more process continues. It's not going to be quick. That's why I'm asking everybody to be patient with us. This is not a quick solution. It's a long-term look and hopefully an effective solution at the end. Ms. Jones, just 1 minute, please.
Very quickly. Been here, was on that committee. 25 years, and it was called, what was it, Beyond 4th Avenue or something like that. And so was Rosalie. But I would say congratulations to Fairview. And, you know, we're not going to fight about a little piece of pie because it's not big enough, Paul. It's not big enough, Heidi. $4 million is not pocket change, but treatment is not free. It's very expensive. And I would suggest that as you continue to hear about solutions, you know, unless the municipality of Anchorage puts real hard cash, you don't get to tell everybody about how they get to spend their money. The state of Alaska, federal dollars, but I would encourage you to expand this conversation because $4 million will be gone in a flash.
2 years.
In a flash. And then what happens after that? So, you know, we've got to get the Mental Health Trust, and Medicaid is a very, very, very critical part to not only the support for these programs, future programs, housing programs, and it's a tough sell. And I'm not here talking about beating up on the governor. You know, he will do what he does, whoever that is. But Medicaid is very, very important. It's a finite piece, but it is the piece that does, you know, support all of these programs. So the Salvation Army, the Rescue Mission, all of these folks need to come into this tent and stop squabbling about what we do and do something, because Catholic Social Services and Beans Cafe, they are the default in people's minds. It's their problem, and that's not fair. And they've been doing that for far too long.
You're here.
That's right.
Thank you. We are a little past 1 o'clock, so we have to adjourn. I want to thank you again for coming. If you have information for us you want to give to the committee, we're studying, we got booklets, we're trying to get on top of this problem other than what we're hearing from you directly, please get them to Ms. Moser at the clerk's office. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.